So good morning. I'm Pili, a creator from M+, colleague of Lara, and we are working for a visual culture museum, which is in Hong Kong. For this presentation, I promised Lisa that I will not introduce M+ in a corporate way. However, this is part of the reason why Laura and we are here, because we want to make us know the museum will open next year, and you are all welcome to the museum by that time. And with the opening display of the show next year, the museum will open with a 7 collection show for the first year, which cover the 20th to the 21st century visual culture. However, for my presentation for today, I would like to echo the 3 questions Lisa proposed in his curatorial notes with our collection practices and thoughts. First, who are collecting? And to echo this question, I would like to begin with the quotation which Claire Bishop gave a speech in 2012 in the museum conference in Hong Kong. And he said, if contemporary art museums do not grasp the critical issue of today and in turn read the past urgently, dialectically, and critically, then run the risk of becoming the status conferring the temples of the 1% who collecting and resemble a pile of aesthetic debris growing even higher towards the sky. I think it's nice. When we are talking about the collecting, we must understand the mechanism behind the collection, which there are very great presentation just before me. And many private museums are arising in our day, and in the meantime, the public museum collection has been more and more associated with the stakeholders, board members, patrons, collectors, donors, and sometimes even government officers. So in a broad sense, a collecting behavior of the institution through a series of very complicated process from the curatorial management to the collection committee and the fundraising process is necessarily a joint effort and the result of a long negotiation. So as a creator of an institution, we must keep aware of this reality. And this reality is very hard to change so far. In this sense, Claire Bishop's point of view is a very important hint. We have to keep aware of that. To avoid the danger of which museum collection becomes the status conferring the temples of the 1% who are collecting resemble a pile of the aesthetic debris, as Claire Bishop said, among the many approaches, the most important one is contextualization. That makes us very different from other private collections. This leads to the second question Lisa proposed. Why are we collecting? To echo this question, I would like to introduce a recent acquisition of M+ in the 2017 Reptile. A work by Chinese artist Huang Yongping was first exhibited at the Centre Pompidou in Paris as a part of the famous exhibitions La Médecine de la Terre, created by Jean-Hubert Martin. This is the first time art from Africa, Asia, and other non-Euro-American places showed in the Western in a big scale and also systematically. And it is also the first time that Huang Yongping was presented as a major Chinese artist there. I just have one historical photos there. And the reptile is a piece surrounded with the materiality and the metaphorical function of the paper bulb, and presented in the form of the Fujian turtle-style tomb, spreading out spread it from across the floor to the wall. And Huang Yongping first began to use the paper pulp in the I just showed this kind of where the shape come from. It's come the very traditional Chinese tomb. And Huang Yongping just started to Huang Yongping began first to use the paper pulp in 1987 when he watched the books of Chinese and Western art history in a washing machine for 30 minutes. This work later became the most iconic piece in the 1980s, where the artist's gesture of the mixing the Asian and the Western remained a self-critical notion underlying Huang Yongping's artistic oath. In Huang Yongping's artistic vocabulary, paper pulp presented the attitude of the Dadaism on cultural criticism and the recycle between the demands and the renewal of the culture. The same paradox also exists in the turtle-style tomb, as both the tomb and the turtle represent the death and the immortality. By pairing up this paradox, Huang Yongping points out the paradoxical position of the cultural institution to produce the meaning by presenting a work, while at the same time remove a work's meaning. Since the period of the Xiamen Dadaism in the 1980s, Huang Yongping has been created work to criticize the cultural institutions. Well, when he began to work in Europe, Huang Yongping brought in the paper pulp in the name of the art into the fragile art institution as a formidable strategy to challenging the museum or the Western museum system on cultural production. Reptile is regarded as the signature piece of Huang Yongping, as well as the signature work making Chinese art in the signature marking Chinese art in the transition of the globalization. And when Huang Yongping produced the work in 1989, Reptile also represents the tension between the artist's creation in our region and the museum mechanism at that time in the West. It presents a cooling and a determination to invite the museum and the art history narrative it presents. After exactly 30 years, when we welcome the explosion of the museum, welcome this kind of the explosion of the museums or institutions in our region. The question is, in this era of the museum explosion, when the art history is generally be questioned and be decentralized, and what kind of a narrative does our institution try to present through our collection? Whenever it is a narrative of fragments, like a paper pulp, or an authoritative native, as those in the big museum in the West, which Huang Yongping challenged. As to M+, a museum, as we just quote from our mission. As M+, a museum dedicated to the collection, collecting, exhibiting, and interpreting visual culture, design, and architecture, moving image of the 20th and the 21st century, a museum whose aim is to create a new kind of the museum that reflects our unique time and place. A museum that builds on the Hong Kong's historical balance of the local and the international to define a distinctive and innovative voice of the Asian 21st century. It's still, for me at least, it's still important or essential to offer a canonic, authoritative, to offer the canonic and authoritative narratives of this region through the collection. The reason may be just simply we haven't had this before. But we are entirely aware that these are the new narratives which is presented by the contextualization rather than just by representation. More important, it can be and must be a temporary and will undoubtedly become the object for questioning, criticizing, and transformation. However, we hope that it will provide a starting point and an opportunity for debate and confrontation to take place. The unique way to make this reptile also bring the fear for the safety of other museums, which this work has been shown. In the year of the 2008, 20 years after it being created, the work has been removed from the gallery during the Huang Yongping's first retrospective in the Woodlands Center of Contemporary Art in Beijing, the same year for the Olympics. Pop produced the mood, which invades the floor and air circulation system and poses a threat to the other loaned work. So this was not the first time, nor the last time Huang Yongping's work has been cancelled. His work has been cancelled in China, but also cancelled 2 years ago in New York due to this kind of animal rights protection things. But for me, his work has been cancelled for many reasons. But as for me, this cancellation is more symbolic and it's more meaningful. When a work returned to its birthplace in 20 years' time, it became a plague and proposed a danger to the safety of his own retrospective. Artworks are usually cancelled because of the safety reason, the safety of the politics, the safety of the public safety, and in this work, conservation safety. But safety comes down, all the safety issue comes down to the economy benefits, whatever is from the political or from the conservation things. If safety is the most important thing, the bank safe is the safest. But if a museum becomes the bank safe, is it a real problem for institution? So this case precisely reflects the trouble of the art and the collecting for today, which art is increasingly subject to be oppression of the economy thinking. So dealing with the artistic work is a dangerous job and a dangerous thing. I mean the real art. If art is not a carrier or a potential threat to the safety, is art still meaningful? So that's my echo to the last question for Leeza, what we are collecting. Thank you.